For thousands of years, the Lenape lived in relationship with the lands now known as Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and New York. They were not simply hunters and fishers, as they're often described. They participated with the land. And I like to say it that way. I say participated with as opposed to another word we hear a lot like steward or cared for. But participated with is sort of what my preference these days, because I think it gives a nod to the land being a living being, and having its own sovereignty. They cultivated food systems, they engineered waterways, they developed rich systems of governance and trade, and they had a relationship with the more than human world, um, in a real fundamental way. And so much of this history has been hidden from view. As faithkeeper and elder Oren Lyons, um, you may know that name, he's with the Iroquois Federation. He has said that the story of Indigenous people after colonization is one of decimation on three fronts. You have the 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 tragedy of disease that sort of happened over decades with visitation from Europeans, right? Accidental disease, plague would wipe out the youngest and the oldest. And then you have decimation of population through violence and attempted genocide. And then you have decimation through erasure, sort of telling the history of this great land, and starting with industrialization or starting with the 13 colonies and not starting with the people who were here for 15,000 years prior. Um, so this uh, time that we're having together tonight is a one small way of bringing what was made invisible back into view. All right, so it's really, really important work, and it's beautiful healing work. Um, so my own journey into Lenape language um, is also a story of my family's history. My paternal grandmother, my father's mother, Helen, spoke of ancestors from indigenous communities in Canada. I didn't learn much more, just a few stories. My father's father, his that lineage traces back to 1735, right? When Amar and her daughter Tab arrive in Yorktown, Virginia, after surviving the transatlantic crossing, right, on a slave ship. The slave ship's name was Doddington. They were from Senegal, West Africa, and they survived unspeakable circumstances, and subsequently were sold into slavery on the Blackwell plantation in Virginia. My mother's father's line goes back to a woman identified as Louisa King. She was having her portrait painted as she boards a ship from Sierra Leone, Africa, as a governess. It's not a slave ship, it's a sailing ship, and she's to be a governess for a family in the States, right? Now, that's my mother's father. All right. But my mother's mother, her name was Gladys. My mother, Sylvia, was the daughter of Gladys, who is the daughter of Florence, the daughter of Catherine, the daughter of Catherine Sr., who appears on the 1840s census as a free person of color. And together with her husband, Stansbury Murray, she owned and farmed land in Murderkill, Delaware, which is homelands of the Lenape. So today, my daughters, Autumn, Madeline, River, Summer, my four daughters, along with my son, Saxon, are the seventh generation descended from that earliest known maternal ancestor, Catherine, who was Lenape, listed as a free person of color in Murder Kill, Delaware. By the 1840s, many Lenape people were finding ways to remain on their ancestral lands, right? You have this uh, forced displacement pushing many families westward, but there were Lenape who intermarried with Germans and Africans and were hiding in plain sight. Families, they farmed lands, they built churches, they raised children, they created communities, and so this is a story of my ancestors, and it's very interesting because I learned to speak and to teach Lenape through the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania, and these are all descendants of folks who are hiding in plain sight this way, right? Not recognized by any state government or federal government. So today, Lenape communities continue to work on cultural renewal, language revitalization, and ceremony. But it's really rare to hear Lenape spoken, and it's even more rare to speak it.